In this video, we're going to go through the DE1 app. That's the tablet app that runs our espresso machines. So when you first power up your tablet, you're going to have one icon with a little espresso machine on it, and you tap to run the app. Once it finishes loading, it will load up with what's called the Insight skin, which is the default skin, and we're going to walk through that here in this video. So the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to connect to the espresso machine and tell you that it's heating because it's just connected. And then it'll also tell you that it has connected to a scale if you've got a compatible Bluetooth scale already connected to it. So going left to right, these tabs here are meant to represent the workflow that you go through typically to make an espresso. So the reason that flush is on the far left is that you should be flushing the group head on your espresso machine before each shot for two reasons. One, just to clean it out, so hot water will come through, use a towel, clean the group head. And then secondly, you can put a cup under the group head to collect that hot flush water, preheating that cup as well, which is a good idea. Next, the espresso tab, which is what we're on now. You're going to make your espresso. And then if you are planning on adding milk to your espresso or hot water, those are the last two tabs. So steam being the most common thing people do to espressos, steaming milk in order to make a milk drink. And then lastly, hot water. Going through the page here, this is showing us right now the pressure profile that's loaded. This is the default pressure. It doesn't have any flow profiling information, and the temperature line here is showing us what the temperature is going to be for this shot. The fact that it goes up and then down is telling us that it's going to be a declining temperature profile. But you don't really need to pay attention too much at this. What you want to know is that green says it's now ready to make an espresso. And what you're going to do is on the group head of your DE1, you're going to tap the button that's closest to you that has an espresso symbol, and that's going to start the espresso. While the espresso is being made, you can follow the progress on the charts. Let me quickly explain what the charts say. This shows your pressure slowly rising to 9 bar and then slowly declining. This shows the water flow going up to 8 milliliters per second and then declining here. This brown line is showing you the flow rate onto the scale, whereas this blue line is showing clean water going into the cup. At the start, there's water going into the coffee here, but nothing coming out. And then as the shot progresses, the blue and the brown lines touch because the puck is now saturated with water. So as you add water to the top of the coffee, coffee comes out. And that's what's happening here. And this shows your temperature for the shots. Because the coffee puck is itself room temperature, you're always going to start slightly below your goal as hot water mixes with room temperature ground coffee. The machine automatically adapts and tries to get the brew temperature to your goal here, which is 88 centigrade. And you can see the shot ended up within half a centigrade of the goal. The weight goal was 36 grams. The shot took 21 seconds, of which 8 seconds were pre-infusion and 13 seconds was pouring. That's, in a nutshell, the statistics around an espresso. Now, how can you tell if it went well? A couple things. One, you're looking for the time. Was the shot time appropriate for the profile that you were using? And generally, you're looking for a shot time between 22 seconds and 28 seconds for espresso. If you're doing a lever shot, it might be something like 25 up to 50 seconds, but it really depends on the profile. You'll need to look at the notes for the profile in order to know what your goals are. Next, let's take a look at steaming. On the bottom here is a slider which lets you control how much water goes into the steam wand. The lower the water, the slower the steaming, but also the drier it is. And generally with our DE1 Pro and XL models, you want to be between 0.4 milliliters per second and 0.8 milliliters per second. With our XXL model, you can go up to 1.2 milliliters per second. And with our Bengal machine, you can go up to 1.5 milliliters per second. If you instead slide this very high, Here I've got it at 2.2 milliliters per second. You're going to be putting more water in than the machine can actually heat, and your steam is just going to be too wet. Nonetheless, this is a handy way to have real-time control over the steam power. Myself, I prefer to have it almost at the lowest so that I can steam slower, which lets me get really good quality foam, but also the milk is going to have less water in it because this will be the driest steam you can have. So if you have the patience for a couple extra seconds of steaming, you'll have better tasting milk drinks with the lowest water flows. You can set the steam to go off at a certain time. If you're always making the same drink, say a latte with 120 grams of milk, then you'll know very quickly how many seconds it takes to steam that. At my home, it takes about 28 seconds, so I have that set to 28 seconds. I fill my milk jug with milk from my refrigerator, and at 28 seconds, it's always at the temperature I want, which is about 60 Celsius. Let me show you what happens when you hit the steam button. You're going to hit the stop button in the center of the group head in order to stop steaming. Now, after the steaming has stopped, you have a few seconds to get your milk jug out. You can do that by pulling the jug to the right, and then the steam one will automatically purge any remaining water in there. That's so that there's no milk on the steam one that might get sucked back in the machine while the heater cools. If you're finding it a bit stressful to get the milk jug off the steam wand in time, there is a setting that allows you to do 2-tap steam stop. And what that means is that when you first tap the steam stopping, you have all the time you want to get the milk jug off, but there's no auto purge until you then tap the group head controller stop again, and then the purge happens. It's totally normal for your espresso machine to make little steam wisping sounds as you're using it to make espresso or to steam milk. That's just the residual water boiling off inside the machine. While the machine is steaming, in Insight Skin, you can tap the chart to see exactly what's happening with your steam. You do have control over the temperature of the steam, but for most people, I would just leave that alone at the maximum setting, which is what it comes shipping with. You can turn steam off by tapping this control here. That's useful because your machine will now heat up faster in the morning. Instead of 4.5 minutes, it'll take about 3 minutes, because that's you indicating that you're not going to use the steam feature of the machine, so don't bother heating it up. It's also going to save you on energy costs to not heat the steam heater on your espresso machine. When you first power your machine up, you'll see that the temperature here is going to be low because the espresso machine is going to prioritize making espresso first and then steam. And so the espresso is going to be ready and hot, and about 10-20 seconds later, the steam will be ready. That's typically great, but if you want to power your machine up and steam first, you're going to have to wait till that temperature rises to the level of steam, which is about 130 Celsius. On the tab for flush, you can control two things: the speed at which water comes out, which is the flow rate, and how long you want the flush to be. Now, because these espresso machines are heat on demand, and obviously you should be using good water, you don't want to flush too much, wasting that water, nor wasting too much heat. Generally, I put my flush rate at either 6 milliliters per second or 4, and a 6-second flush is perfectly enough. What that means is when you hit the flush button, it'll turn on at 4 milliliters per second and turn off automatically after 6 seconds, so you don't have to hit the stop button. And finally, if you're making an Americano, there is the water tab. That's going to put hot water at whatever temperature you want, at whatever flow rate you want. Now, generally, flow rate max is the best. You don't need to put water in slower. You're going to decide how much water in. If you have a scale, it's by weight and the temperature. Now, generally, if you're making an Americano, you'll want a finished drink that's around 50 to 60 Celsius. So here I'm going to tap on the temperature and type in 50, which will then get me 50 centigrade water and probably something like 150 grams of water, like so. When I tap the hot water button, I'll be given 150 grams exactly based on the scale of 50 Celsius water for that perfect Americano. That's the basics of using the main Insight skin. Now let's take a look at profiles, which are different ways of making espresso or other kinds of drinks. To find the profiles, you tap the Settings button, which is in the bottom right, and you tap the Presets tab, and that will list all the profiles here that are called presets. Now I have many of them already visible here. Some we've created at the cafe, some were already part of the espresso machine. If you want to hide or show certain profiles, because we don't show that many of them to hopefully not overwhelm you, you tap the eyeball button, which is right here. And in doing so, you'll now get checkboxes next to all the different profiles that are in this machine. And you can hide or show them by checkboxing the ones that you want. Most of the time, you're going to choose a profile that's appropriate to the drink or the coffee bean. And so, for example, we've been using the default profile, and just underneath it is the E61 profile. Now we have videos on choosing the right profile for the right bean, and we've got videos for light, medium, and dark roasts. I don't want to go into selecting the right profile in this video. Watch those other videos, they're very helpful. So here we are with E61, for example, and I hit OK. And now you can see that this line here has changed and this line here has changed. So what does that mean? That means this is a very simple pressure profile. It goes straight up to 9 bar and holds 9 bar. And it also holds the water at 92 Celsius. Now that's different from the previous one that had a profile that went up then down and a temperature that went up then down. So this skin is giving you just a quick glimpse of what the espresso is going to be like. And again, going back to settings, I have a choice of many different ones that I want. If there's some profiles I don't like, I can simply tap the trash can sign and that will erase it. If it's a profile I created, then it will be erased forever. If it's a profile that came with the machine, it'll just be hidden. You cannot delete any of the profiles that we give you. And the other thing is that if you modify a profile that we have given you, there is a reset to default button. So for example, if I go into this and I change the temperature now to be 90.5 Celsius, this reset to default button will bring it back to 92 Celsius if I press that. So you cannot permanently damage your machine by changing any of the built-in profiles. On each profile, you've got a description here and a name. So if I were to modify this, for example, to be a different temperature, I could give it a new name and save it that way. This plus or minus that I just used right here quickly set the temperature of the whole shot. If it has many steps, all those steps will go up or down in temperature in concert. And this description, you can fully read here. This is a very simple profile. But if I pick a more complicated one, for example, extractamundo dose, there's a tap here for more button. And in so doing, I now have all the notes that are telling me, for example, what kind of flow rate I'm aiming for, how to dial it in with the ratio, as well as why this profile exists. And quite a lot of work went into trying to write these descriptions to help you dial it in and also to know when you might want to use it. So do check out those descriptions. There is a plus button here, and that's going to let you create your own profiles. Now to do that, you're going to hit plus, and you'll notice there are 3 buttons: pressure, flow, and advanced. Let's go through each of those 3 now. Pressure profiles are the simplest. They are 3 steps. There is a pre-infusion where water goes on the coffee puck. And unique to our Decent Espresso machines is this feature here, where it says less than 4 bar. And what that is that pre-infusion is going to end automatically when water is being no longer soaked up by the coffee puck fast enough and pressure is being built. Now, the reason that's useful is that other machines require you to know how many seconds you should put of water onto the coffee puck. And it's quite hard to guess. It also is very dependent on whether the tubes are dry. So your first shot of the day on those other machines is going to require more water than your second shot where the tubes are full. The Decent doesn't work that way at all. Instead, it's going to put water in and it's going to continue until some pressure is built on it. 4 bars being a good default, or 20 seconds. But in practice, this is actually the trigger that's going to stop pre-infusion and go to the next stage, which is to rise. Now this shot is going to rise over 15 seconds of time. That's this. And it's going to hold 6 bars as it is now. There's no limitation of flow. What that is if you've ground far too coarsely, for example, you might have a lot of water gushing through. If you want to limit that from happening, you can say limit flow. And here I've limited it to 2 mils per second, 2.1. What that means is as the pressure goes up to 6 bars, if the grind is too coarse and we go at faster than 2 milliliters per second, then don't try and go to 6 bars, just do what you can, don't go over that. That's a unique feature to the Decent Espresso machine because it allows you to save shots that otherwise you'd have to discard because the flow rate went too high. And when the flow rate goes too high, those are called gushers. The water is just spraying all over the place. It's better in that situation to have less pressure, but have the water flow slow down. So that's what the limit flow feature is doing. And after 15 seconds of holding at 6 bar, it's going to decline to 4 bar. That's what this is. Now, the shot is never going to take 30 plus 15 plus 20 seconds. The reality is pre-infusion will take something between 5 and 12 seconds, whatever it takes to get to 4 bar. And then we will have 15 seconds of this, and then we'll start to decline. But the number we really want to pay attention to is stop at weight. If you don't have a scale, it'll say stop at volume. And what that is doing is it'll stop the espresso making automatically when what you have in the cup is the weight you desired. And so if, for example, we were doing 1 milliliters per second because our coffee was very finely ground, I would get about 15 grams here with another 17 still to be done. So I'd make 15 here, and then this would be proceeding, and let's say this was also 1 mil per second, just to give us some simple maths. This total shot time here would be 32 seconds. So not the 45 seconds here, 15 here, and about 17 here. It doesn't really matter. What you're really looking for is for stop at weight to be the amount of coffee that you have indicated. The 2 sliders that are the most important for changing the flavor are this and this. This is your peak pressure, and this is your end pressure. And so here we are with a 6 bar shot, but let's say that we wanted to do a 9 bar shot. That's how we do it. You can tap here, or hold here and drag up and down. That's how these sliders work. So now I've increased the pressure to 9. And let's say that this is not that darker roast. And so I don't want to hold this pressure for too long. It's starting to gush, for example. I'm going to slide this to make it shorter, like so. So now only 7 seconds on this. And let's say the puck is now holding for a few seconds, and I want the pressure to be declining because the water is speeding up. The puck is eroding, and it's getting really acidic. And so what I might do is slide this down, thus lowering the pressure, taking off a lot of the acidity off the end of the shot. If you're using a very dark roast and the flow rate isn't increasing, you might not want to do this because you might find that the shot is just going slower and slower and slower at the end, and it's taking 60, 70, 80 seconds for your shot. And so you might want to do something like this and keep the pressure fairly high, but slightly declining so that you don't have acidity, but you also don't go too slow. This last slider here is probably the most important one when you're trying to adjust your profile to give you a mouthfeel and acidity that you're liking. The more that you slow this down, the more you're going to have mouthfeel. You can have less acidity as well, and the shot's going to take longer. And that's why this three-step editor is so handy. All right, let me show you flow profiling. So that's here. It's going to be a very similar editor to pressure profiling, but the curves look a little bit different. So here we are with the pre-infusion, and pre-infusion works the same in those two profiles. Pre-infusion on the Decent for these profiles is always flow controlled. Now let's say I want that to be a fast fill, like so. And the reason you would want to use a flow profiled shot is if you're trying to imitate, for example, a manual lever machine where you had someone watching it and they were adjusting their muscle strength to try and get a constant flow rate. The Decent can just do that for you. So what this is here saying is pre-infuse really quickly until you reach 4 bar. And then just give me 2 milliliters per second. And let's not have a decline at all. Let's keep this really simple. So pre-infuse 2 milliliters per second until you hit that, which should take about 16 seconds. So 16 seconds plus this. Let's say this was 10 seconds. Total shot time, 26 seconds. A really nice, quite complicated shot to do with a manual lever. On traditional machines, you just couldn't do because the pressure is not defined here. The most important thing here is the flow rate. And in extraction theory, chemists talk about flow rate being by far the most important thing, or specifically contact time with a solvent. So that's what flow profiling does. And you would be tinkering with this number here, the flow rate, if you were experimenting with different roast levels. So the darker the roast, the more I would want to bring this down. And let's say I might do 1 milliliter per second. But if I were doing something that was quite light, I might go quite fast with 3.5 milliliters per second. If you want to make a very thick, dark roasted shot, I would say probably you would start at 0.5, and then you would, instead of declining, you would go up to 1 milliliter per second. Now, the reason that you might have an increasing flow rate here is because the shot is eroding, and you want to increase the flow rate to maintain a little bit of pressure. But if you're getting too much acidity, you might not. You might want to go the other way and start very slowly at 1 mil per second, and then decline down to 0, which is what a traditional lever machine would do. Go up in pressure, and then all the way until the spring goes to 0. So quite a lot of power to copy machines from history in this flow profile editor. Let's now look at advanced shots. Now here we are. Let's take a look at the adaptive profile. And there's a chart here you can see. It's a quite complicated thing. If I tap advanced, I can now look at it and I have all the steps here. And as I tap on steps, here, the variables on the right-hand side will change. Now, advanced programming is, as the word says, quite advanced. Generally, most people simply pick an advanced profile and they don't change it. The description on an advanced profile might give you some tips of things you want to change, but I'd say 1% of the public wants to change advanced profiles. I'm not going to go into it in this video because it's a video and a lesson all to its own. If you don't know what you're doing, you'll probably make the shot worse by editing the advanced profile. The fact that they're so advanced is the reason why there's pressure and flow profiles that we just showed you that were really easy to edit. So if you want to tinker, pressure and flow profiles are your friend, and you can choose different advanced profiles as a way to tinker. On the advanced profiles, there is a limits tab, and this is one thing that you might want to tinker with, namely stop at wait. That's the main number you want to pay attention to, which is when should your shot stop. This here, track water volume, is telling the machine when pre-infusion is ending and when it should track that water is now going into the cup. That's going to be set correctly for you. Don't mess with that if you didn't write your own profile. Just change the stop at weight or stop at volume setting to fit the amount you want in your cup. In the settings section, there are tabs for machine and for app. Now let's go through the machine tab. What these are settings that will affect the machine. Quickly here, this is how many espressos you've made, how much steam, how much hot water, versions of various components. The energy saver will automatically cool the machine down after a certain amount of time of not making any drinks. So in this case, if I don't make any drinks for 38 minutes, the machine will just cool down automatically. If you don't want to use that feature, just slide it left and it's off and your machine will warm up when you tell it to, and you'll tap it to put it back to sleep. You also have this keep hot feature here. What that will do is two things. One, at 8:38, as it's set here, the machine will wake up and warm up. So if you are coming to the office at 9 o'clock, this is a handy way for the machine to have been warmed up for 20 minutes before you come in. And then ends at this time. This does not mean that the machine will turn off at 6 o'clock. What it means is that at 6 o'clock, if no shots have been made, it will turn off. But it just means that now this cool down will kick in. So if I had cool down set, for example, to something like 15 minutes, then at 6 o'clock, if someone had just made a shot, 15 minutes later, it would cool down. In order to clean the machine, what you'll want to do is take a portafilter, put a blank portafilter basket in. That's a basket with no holes. Put a spoonful of cleaning product in, lock it in place, and hit the cleaning profile. Now, this funny graphic of capybaras bathing in lemon-scented water will appear. And what's happening now is water is flushing through the group head, rinsing through that detergent, and cleaning your machine. You can then tap it once you want that to stop. The descale button is a little bit different. You'll want to descale, especially if you find that steam is starting to oscillate. It goes faster and then slower, faster, slower. That's a telltale sign that you've got some calcium building up inside your tubes. If you're using extremely low calcium water, you won't need to descale very often, if at all, which is why low calcium water is recommended. This is a little illustration showing you how to descale the machine. Please only use citric acid powder. Do not use any commercial descaling solutions. They often will have other chemicals in them and they can destroy your machine. If you use those other products to clean your machine and it's destroyed, that will not be a warranty repair. Citric acid is also cheap and available as an organic product. So there's really no reason to buy anything with citric acid. It is so easy. The instructions are right here. Just clean with citric acid powder. You're going to tap the Descale Now button, and then again, capybaras having a nice bath as your machine is descaled. This will take a few minutes and your machine will be now ready to be descaled again, but with clean water, which will rinse out all the citric acid solution. The Calibrate page has a bunch of scary stuff in it, and we're going to go through that rather quickly. You'll see that if you tap the button, there is a warning saying, if you don't know what you're doing, maybe you shouldn't be here. So I'm going to second that. Here is temperature, pressure, and flow calibration. The main reason to be on this page is for flow calibration. On our espresso machines, because voltage varies all over the world, so you might have a 200 voltage country or a 220 voltage country, and the pumps are going to behave slightly differently. The flow calibration number is going to adjust for that. Now, when we ship to you, we and the boxing team calibrate your machine using a table showing us what voltage you have in your country. So most of the time, you don't need to tinker with this. And in fact, there's a better way to do flow calibration with what's called the graphical flow calibrator. We'll talk about that later in this video. Pressure calibration, you should really not touch unless you have a SCASE or other kind of calibration device. If you get that wrong, your machine can very easily be inoperable. And temperature calibration, you also shouldn't mess with unless you've got a SCASE and you're making sure that the SCASE and the DE1 are exactly the same. Now, the reason you shouldn't mess with these is that temperature and pressure are set at the factory with a precise measurement device, and they generally don't change from what we have here to you, and with age, they don't tend to drift. It's really only flow, because of voltage, that will tend to change. So that's the one to look at there. Steam temperature. If you have, for example, a double XL machine, which has a very powerful steam heater, and you're making quite small drinks, you might want to lower your steam temperature here to something lower. You're basically lowering the heat capability of your machine. However, everybody else generally wants the most powerful steam that they can get. Just leave that high. And lastly, the steam flow rate is being set by inside skin, so it's not available. Now, there are two other pages on this calibration page here. The voltage gets automatically detected, so you don't have to set this. The set numbers are just informational, and they're there really for the old 1011 machines that didn't auto-detect. These things here are all about what happens when you press the espresso button before it starts. So unique to the Decent Espresso machine is that water is going to go from the heaters through the pumps all the way to the group head and then be measured. And if it's not good enough, it's going to go right back to the water tank and then circulate. So what these numbers are quickly telling you here, the heater idle temperature is when your DE1 is just sitting there. What temperature is the heater sitting at? When you press the espresso button, there's two things that happen. There is a warm-up phase, and this is saying how fast should water circulate through it. 2 milliliters per second is fine. And then here's the heater test phase. We have a flow rate and a timeout. So that when you press the espresso button, it first has a heat up phase here, the warm up. And then there's a final test, which is here. And what this is saying is test for 1 second at a flow rate of 4 milliliters per second. Now, if you are extremely fastidious and you would like to have the most precise water temperature ever, you can increase this. I've done 11 seconds here. The flow rate probably shouldn't change. What that means is that if the water temperature is not precisely what it's supposed to be, the machine might take up to 11 seconds to start your espresso. Honestly, this is much fiddling. I wouldn't bother because in that first 1-2 seconds, your water is going to be within 1 or 2 Celsius accurate, and your coffee grounds are room temperature. So making the water even more accurate just doesn't make sense because the coffee grounds are going to completely destabilize the water temperature. So what's more interesting is the fact that hot water is going in, hitting the coffee puck, being measured, and the machine's automatically adjusting to bring the whole puck up right to temperature. So this, I wouldn't worry about fiddling with it. Now you know what it's for. The last page of calibration, though, does have some useful things. So this is the hot water flow rate. This was when I was making Americanos. Now this skin that I'm using, Insight, lets you control that, but if the skin you're using doesn't, this is where you do that. The same thing with flush and the flush timeout. So all these things are controlled by Insight skin. You don't need them, but if you choose another skin, you might. Now, 2-tap steam stop. That's there so that if you are finding it stressful to get your milk jug away from your steam wand in time, you can enable this feature. What this will do is that when you hit stop on your group head, the steam will stop, but there will be no flush. You have all the time in the world to take the steam wand out of your milk jug, and then you hit stop again, and then you'll get the steam flush. So that's what 2-tap steam stop is. The slow start feature is there if your machine is gumming up and you don't have time to clean it. What you'll find is the main water valve is not opening and closing as quickly as it should. You'll really need to decalcify, but if the machine needs to be making coffee right now, you don't have time and you just want it to take longer to open up the main valve, you tap the slow start and the machine will give it up to 2 seconds to open the main valve and start making espresso. But don't leave it on that permanently. Go decalcify your machine and then put it back to normal. The Eco Steam feature is there to lower your power consumption while the machine is just sitting there. And what that does is it will wait several minutes after you've stopped steaming, and then it'll turn the steam heater off. Once you make espresso, it'll bring the steam heater back up. So EcoSteam is basically saying, power the machine up. I probably want to make an espresso and steam some milk. After I've steamed milk, if I don't make another espresso right away, turn the steam heater off. When I make espresso again, probably I have a minute. It's about what it takes to make an espresso. And then the steam will be there for you. The reason that's helpful is because the steam heater is idling at 160 Celsius, whereas the espresso heater is at 100 Celsius. And that extra temperature means the steam heater is using 2/3 of the power consumed by the espresso machine when it's just sitting there. So turning on EcoSteam will lower the idle power consumption of our machine by 2/3. And probably you'll never even notice, because as soon as you tap on the screen, the steam is going to start heating up again. So I do recommend EcoSteam for anyone who wants to use less power, and especially if you're not making much steam milk in general. It's a quite cool feature. If you're running off batteries, say you are on a boat or an RV, really use the EcoSteam feature. Your batteries will be happy for it. Finally, there is the refill kit here, auto detect force on, force off. That's there because if you use the refill kit, when you power on, the machine is going to detect whether it's there. Now, you might sometimes be adding the refill kit while the D1's already on, and so it won't know that it's there, it won't use it. If that's what you want to do, you can do force on, and then your espresso machine is always going to try and power on the refill kit whenever you're low on water. That is all you have in the Calibrate pages. If you're going to go away for a while, it's good to empty the espresso machine of all its water so it doesn't dry up and leave residue behind. But also, if you're going to take your espresso machine somewhere, you want to get all the water out of the inside, because when you put it in the suitcase, that water might come out in the suitcase, moisten your suitcase, and God forbid, it could get on the PCBs. So the transport button, when I press it, is going to give me instructions. And the way this works is you're going to, as it said, move the water tank forward and then hit the OK button. And for a minute or two, the machine is now going to suck all the water that's inside the machine and dribble it into this water tank. And then you're going to throw the water out, and your machine is now empty of water, can be transported or left alone for a long time. Here on the machine page, there is a firmware button. If the app has new firmware, you're going to tap this button, and then there are instructions that come on screen telling you how to update the firmware. The first step here is to power off the machine, hit the OK button, power it back on, and then wait about an hour. That will update the firmware to the latest version. You rerun the app and you'll be up to date. Finally, on the machine page is the water level refill setting. Now, generally, you just want to leave it at the lowest. That means that the machine won't bug you to refill the tank until it's quite low. However, let's say you make a lot of drinks that use a lot of water. Let's say you're making tea or pour-overs. You might find that this small amount of water here is not enough to do an entire drink. And the problem is you might run out of water mid-drink. So you can have the machine bug you to refill at a much sooner point. And this is saying about when there's 680 milliliters of water, bother me to now add some more water. If you have a refill kit, this feature isn't used. The machine will simply refill as it needs. This is only if you're filling your water tank by hand to make sure you never run out of water mid-drink making. Next, we're going to look at the App tab. Now, this has a number of settings for changing the app itself. Up here, quite simple, is the Update button. That will update the app to the latest version. And if I tap it, it will tell me whether the app is up to date or not. So it does updating, and then in a second, it'll say whether there is an update or not. In this case, there are 3 files for the update, and once it's done, it'll say updated 3, or updated however many files it did. When I hit the OK button, the app will now exit and I have to relaunch it because I've just updated the software. This setting here is the screen brightness, and that's pretty self-evident, but I will note that the screen brightness will go down automatically if the battery charge is quite low. Down here, you only ever use this when you first get your espresso machine, and you will find that we've already prepared the DE1 to your tablet. But if you bought your own tablet, you would tap Search and then choose the DE1 that you've got. You will also use this if you buy a scale, hit Search, tap the scale in order to pair it. If you get rid of a scale, you change scales, you should tap on the scale and hit the Remove button, which will then disconnect that scale from this app, and then you can connect a different one. Up here on the top right, we've got the skin button. We, at the very beginning, mentioned that we were using the Insight skin, which is the default. There are a number of other skins as well. So there's a preview of Insight. Beyond the scope of this video, because the skins really change everything about how the app works. Nonetheless, DSX, DSX2 are written by Damien. They're extremely powerful. They're very popular with what I'd say are power users, people who want more features. And there's some interesting features. For example, there's the ability to weigh your milk, and it calculates how much steam will be needed to heat that milk to the temperature that you specify. Super cool, and there are other features like that. Definitely, once you've used your Decent for a while, check out DSX and especially DSX2. See if they do what you like. Insight and Insight Dark, it's just a dark version of the Insight skin. The metric skin is a quite simplified user interface by someone who programs applications for heavily disabled people. And so he's done something that's very clear, easy to use. I think it's a quite neat skin. Mimosa Cafe was done by Joanna in Germany in collaboration with a number of cafes. So the idea behind this skin is speed of workflow. And then the streamlined skin is the most recent one. It's something I've been working on. And it's inspired largely by Mimosa Cafe to come up with a skin that streamlines the process, makes it as fast as possible to make the drinks. I'd like to think it's a little prettier. I worked with a designer named Pulak on it. And so all these skins, Streamline, Mimosa, Insight, and the DSXs, are all popular with hundreds, if not thousands of people, and they're all worth trying, but beyond the scope of this video. Language should be pretty self-evident. This application has been translated into a number of other languages, and you can specify them, and after you exit, you'll now be using it in that language. Extensions are features that the open source community has added. They are similar to skins, but instead of completely replacing the functionality of the app, they just add something specific. I'll go through some of the most popular ones. dFlow is a simplified editor for a whole family of espresso profiles, and is one of my favorites. It'll make you a variety of different styles of espresso, but without having to know all the advanced profiles. So it asks you simplified questions, but makes rather fancy profiles out of it. Aflow is inherited from dFlow, but it's trying to make variations in the adaptive profile. The descheduler extension allows you to set the times when you want the machine to warm up and cool down, but on a daily basis, as opposed to the same schedule for every day. Useful, for example, if you wake up at different times on the weekend than from weekdays. Describe Your Espresso is probably the most popular extension for the app. That has a whole suite of features that lets you describe what went on with your espresso, what the beans were, the grind settings, how well it tasted, but also features letting you compare different historical shots. It's really almost an app of its own and incredibly useful, and most of the skins integrate deeply with it because it's so useful. this MQTT integration, besides that being kind of an intimidating set of 4 letters, that's home integration. So, for example, Apple HomeKit and Google has home and automation stuff. That will turn this espresso machine app into something that can talk to your home automation. So you can have it warm up and cool down, for example, but it'll also log things like how many espressos you're making as part of your home automation. So quite neat feature. And then finally, upload to Visualizer. If you Google espresso visualizer, you will find a website that allows you to save and compare shots. And here under settings, I'm not going to show it because it'll show my name and password. You can have an account on Visualizer, and every espresso that you make will get automatically uploaded to it. That is, first of all, very useful, but it's also useful because you can show your shots to other people. You can also download profiles that other people have used to make those shots into your own espresso machine. And so Visualizer, along with Describe Your Espresso, are possibly the most popular extensions we have. And I didn't mention, but I should, the graphical flow calibrator. What that will do is help you easily set the calibration for every single profile to be just right without any fuss. So when you make a shot, you'll find a little button that lets you make the brown, which is the scale line, touch the blue line, and then the calibration will be set automatically. So if you're someone who worries about flow calibration being just perfect, then the graphical flow calibrator is a useful thing. Probably won't make any effect on the quality of your coffee, but once again, if you're someone who cares about such things, there it is. And finally, we have the Miscellaneous tab, which has a lot of miscellany in it. I'm going to go through it. So there is a screensaver, and what the screensaver is that when you put your espresso machine to sleep, a screensaver will pop up. And when you tap the screensaver, the machine will warm up again. Now, to turn on the screensaver, you tap this power button here, and you'll see that the screensaver kicks in. And when I tap the screensaver goes away, and the machine is back on again. You can change what the screensavers are, as well as the brightness here, how often they change, or if you want, you can set the screensaver to always be black, which then keeps it as dark as possible. You can choose which version of the app you want. The most important choices are either nightly or stable. Stable is going to typically change every 6 months. That's our release calendar. And nightly, just as the name suggests, is the live changing DE1 app with every new feature and is often cutting edge, which means it has the newest features, but they may not work. When you're using stable, you can be assured it is working, but you're 6 months delayed from the coolest new stuff. So choose which of these you want, and when you hit the update button, it'll automatically update to that version. There is also an update automatically button, which will update to nightly or stable, depending on which one you've chosen. The way that works is at 3 a.m., if there's a new version, it will download it. And next time you use settings, hit OK. If it downloaded a new version, it will then apply it and you relaunch the app. So that's a nice way to just keep up to date. If you don't want to keep up to date, you should disable that. AM PM is for those in different parts of the world that use 24-hour time. So is it 14 o'clock or 2 p.m.? Well, you get to choose. This is for European ways of writing numbers where they swap the comma and the period. So in America, 1,000 is typically 1 comma, 3 zeros. In Europe, it's 1 period and 3 commas. So that lets you do that. Dim screen when the battery is low, you'll want to keep that on. That is, as it suggests, going to make the screen darker if your battery is low. Do you want sounds? That's if you tap on the screen. Do you want it to go chirp, 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 chirp to let you know that you tapped? Keep scale on. Now, that's a feature that will, when you put the machine to sleep, by default, the scale is going to be disconnected. And that's so that you can now power it off. You should then power your scale back on when you bring the DE1 back awake. However, If your scale is plugged in so that it never runs out of batteries, you probably want to tap Keep Scale On, because that way when you turn the espresso machine off, the scale screen will go off if you're using a decent scale, or not if you're not, but the Bluetooth connection will remain. And the advantage then is that when you tap the screen, the scale is still there and still connected. So Keep Scale On, useful if you are USB powering your scale. The font size and resolution, those are only there if you're using your own tablet. So if you're using a tablet that has a much larger screen, when you install this app, you might find that the font size is much too small, and you'll want to change that, say, from 0.5 to 0.6 to 0.7. And here the resolution is to match the resolution of your tablet. So you might need to look online to see what resolution your tablet actually is, and then move through that. If your tablet is upside down, the way you've mounted it, you might want to tap the flip button, which is going to flip the display upside down. Here, in fact, I'm using this display upside down from where it normally is. So normally it is like this, and I have the flip setting on. And then finally, smart charging. This is there because Android historically has always charged the battery, even if it's not needing to at 100%, which makes the battery age very quickly. So we worked around that Android feature by having smart charging on, off, or nighttime. I'll quickly explain what that is. If you've got a Samsung tablet, you don't need this because Samsung is one of the few brands that has its own smart charging built in. So that's why smart charging is off, because this right here is a Samsung tablet. If you have a non-Samsung tablet, you should have this on. And what that's going to do is it's going to keep your tablet charged between 60 and 80%. So to go up to 80%, turn the charger off, let the battery decline to 60, and then back up to 80. And that's going to hugely increase the lifespan of your battery. So please do that. What nighttime is that when Android tablets have the charger turned on or off, they'll often turn the screen on for a few seconds to let you know the battery is now charging, and then they'll go off. If you're sleeping next to your DE1, that can be super annoying because it wakes you up. So what night means is that it'll charge the battery up to 100% right before it's sleep time, and then the entire night, it's not going to charge the battery unless it gets critically low. Then, when it's wake up time, it'll then charge the battery up again between 60 and 80%. So 60 and 80% during the day, 100 back down to 0. And that's only if you're sleeping next to your DE1. If you're not, don't use the nighttime feature. Finally, Celsius and Fahrenheit, two different measurements for hot water. The Decent is always going to operate, though, with grams. We don't support ounces because it's just too big a measurement to be meaningful for espresso, whereas Fahrenheit's just fine for measuring the heat of things. That is a quick overview, whirlwind tour of the DE1 app. It is rather full-featured. I hope this was helpful. I do think, though, that once you get using this, you'll find it makes your coffee journey just a bit easier. And you might want to play with some of the other skins that are different ways of thinking about making espresso. Once again, DSX, Skin, Insight, and Streamline being the most popular and the ones I'd recommend you check out next. Thanks for watching.